The year was 1955. America was a nation cleaving itself along an invisible, yet fiercely guarded line of color. In Montgomery, Alabama, the air was thick with the suffocating laws of Jim Crow. Separate water fountains, separate schools, separate buses, a separate and subordinate existence for African Americans. It was here, in this crucible of codified cruelty, that the world first truly met the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. He was just 26, freshly minted with a PhD from Boston University, a scholar with a cadence of fire and brimstone inherited from generations of Baptist preachers. He had arrived to shepherd the flock at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, expecting a quiet academic ministry. Fate, however, had another assignment for him. On a cold December day, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a city bus. Her simple, weary act of defiance ignited the Montgomery bus boycott. The local leaders needed a spokesperson, someone whose intellect could match the fire in their souls, someone who could articulate their plight to the world. They chose the young Dr. King. King's initial speeches were not just protests, they were philosophical declarations. He introduced a new, astonishing vocabulary to the civil rights struggle, agape. This was the Greek term for unconditional, self-sacrificing love, a love he argued must be the bedrock of their nonviolent existence. His intellectual commitment to Mahatma Gandhi's principles of satyagraha, truth force, was absolute. He taught his followers not just to endure the violence of the segregationists, but to absorb it, to use their own suffering as a moral weapon that would ultimately shame and transform the oppressor. This was his first miracle, convincing a deeply oppressed people to forego the instinctive, justified urge for violent retaliation and choose the excruciating path of nonviolence. It was an astonishing gamble. The boycott lasted 381 days. King's home was bombed. He was arrested, yet the black community held firm. In 1956, the Supreme Court declared bus segregation unconstitutional. The victory was immense, but it was just the first skirmish. King had successfully translated the raw frustration of an entire race into a disciplined, effective political force. He had been elevated from a local preacher to the moral architect of a national movement. He was now the voice of the American conscience, and the voice that the establishment and its darkest elements would come to fear most. The subsequent decade became a breathless whirlwind of relentless activism. King co-founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, to organize the movement across the South. He became a target, not just of Southern segregationists, but of the federal government itself. A particularly chilling chapter began in the early 1960s. JEdgarHoover, the all-powerful director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, became obsessed with King. Hoover viewed King's activism as a communist-inspired plot to destabilize America. The Bureau, initially tasked with protecting civil rights workers, instead devoted vast resources to surveillance, wiretapping, and harassment under a program codenamed COINTELPRO. The facts uncovered by meticulous historical research are shocking. The FBI bugged King's homes, offices, and hotel rooms across the country. They monitored his every move, every conversation, every private moment. They attempted, through anonymous letters and leaked information, to discredit King, to pressure him to resign from the SCLC, and even, incredibly, to encourage him to commit suicide. This internal war waged by the nation's top law enforcement agency against its most prominent civil rights leader remains one of the darkest stains on American democratic history. King, aware of the surveillance, continued his work, walking a tightrope between constitutional rights and the paranoia of the state.
the struggle intensified in the early 60s. In 1963, King chose Birmingham, Alabama, Bombingham as it was grimly known, for a major campaign. He believed that the brutality of Police Commissioner Eugene Bull Connor, who used fire hoses and police dogs on peaceful demonstrators, would force the nation to confront the reality of Jim Crow. The moment of truth arrived in August 1963. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom was one of the largest political rallies in American history. Standing before the Lincoln Memorial, King delivered the "I Have a Dream" speech. It was a rhetorical masterpiece that transcended the political moment, an oration that fused the Declaration of Independence with the prophetic vision of the Bible. "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." This single speech transformed the movement from a regional Southern struggle into a universal quest for human dignity. It led directly to the passage of the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. In the same year, King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. He had reached the mountaintop. But as King gained political victories, the movement began to fracture, and the problems he faced grew exponentially more complex. Part 3. The Shadow of the Vietnam War and the Poor People's Campaign. After the victories of 1964 and 1965, King realized that dismantling legal segregation was not enough. Economic injustice, or the economic exploitation of the poor, remained. He began focusing on the northern ghettos, where de facto segregation created poverty and despair just as entrenched as the laws he had fought in the South. This shift brought him into conflict with new, powerful forces. First, he broke with President Lyndon B. Johnson over the Vietnam War. In his transformative speech in 1967, Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence, King denounced the war not just as a political mistake, but as a moral catastrophe that drained money from anti-poverty programs and sent poor Black Americans to fight for freedoms abroad that they were denied at home. This alienated the White House, the media, and many former allies within the mainstream civil rights establishment, who felt he should stick to Negro rights. King argued that all issues, poverty, racism, and militarism, were interwoven. Second, he launched his final, most ambitious project, the Poor People's Campaign. His goal was to unite poor people of all races, Black, white, Latino, and Native American, to march on Washington, D.C. and demand an economic Bill of Rights from Congress. This was a radical proposal, a direct challenge to the fundamental capitalist structure of the nation. King was moving toward a democratic socialist critique, viewing poverty as a moral failure of the American system itself. He was tired, deeply discouraged, and facing criticism from all sides. From the government, the FBI, Hoover, who saw him as an agitator, from Black militants like Stokely Carmichael, who dismissed nonviolence as obsolete and ineffective, from the white moderate establishment, who saw him as a radical for opposing the Vietnam War. In March 1968, King traveled to Memphis, Tennessee, to support striking sanitation workers, the poorest of the working poor. The workers carried signs that read simply, "I am a man." This final campaign, a fight for economic dignity, was the living embodiment of his Poor People's Campaign. The atmosphere in Memphis was electric and tense. King was staying in room 306 at the Lorraine Motel, a historically Black-owned establishment. His final public speech, delivered the night of April 3, 1968, was an eerie, prophetic reflection on his mortality. It was the mountaintop speech. Speaking to a huge, rain-soaked audience, King acknowledged the threats against his life. Quote, "I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land." End quote. It sounded like a farewell. The next day, Thursday, April 4th, 1968, at 6:01 p.m., King stood on the motel's balcony, talking to his colleagues in the courtyard below. He was discussing the logistics of the next march and asked his musician, Ben Branch, to play the song "Precious Lord, Take My Hand" particularly well at the upcoming rally. In that instant, a single rifle shot, a Remington Model 760 Game Master, cracked through the evening air. The bullet, fired from a boarding house room across the street, struck King in the jaw, severing his spinal cord and lodging in his shoulder. He collapsed instantly, the cigar smoke from the balcony rail still curling innocently into the air. He was rushed to St. Joseph's Hospital, but the wound was catastrophic. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was pronounced dead at 7:05 p.m. He was 39 years old. The news ripped through the nation like a seismic shockwave. James Earl Ray, a petty criminal and known racist, was eventually captured and confessed to the murder. The aftermath, a nation ablaze. The immediate reaction was devastating. King had preached nonviolence, but his murder provoked a wave of violence across the country that proved the immense moral weight he had carried. Riots erupted in over 100 cities: Baltimore, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and others. The National Guard was deployed. Whole blocks of urban centers burned. The nation was not just mourning a leader, it was reacting to the violent, definitive interruption of a dream of peace. The assassination forced the quick passage of the last major piece of civil rights legislation, the Fair Housing Act of 1968, often called the Civil Rights Act of 1968. It was a victory forged in blood and fire.
The official account names James Earl Ray as the lone racist assassin. Ray was given a 99-year prison sentence. However, the circumstances surrounding the murder quickly became shrouded in doubt, giving rise to one of the most persistent and astonishing conspiracy theories in American history. Here are the unsettling questions that continue to fuel the historical debate. The FBI's role. Given the extensive long-term surveillance and aggressive harassment of King by the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover, could the Bureau, or elements within it, have been indirectly or directly involved, or at least have facilitated the environment for the crime? Ray's funding and escape. Ray was a minor criminal with no known wealth or international connections. Yet, after the assassination, he managed to travel across continents, London, Lisbon, on a Canadian passport under an assumed name. Who financed his extensive travels and provided him with the necessary resources? The retraction. 3 days after confessing, Ray retracted his guilty plea, claiming he was set up by a mysterious figure named Raoul, who provided him with money and instructions. He spent the rest of his life maintaining his innocence, arguing that he was the scapegoat in a larger plot. The King family's belief. Astonishingly, the King family themselves publicly questioned the verdict. Coretta Scott King and her children met with Ray and advocated for a retrial, believing a government conspiracy or an organized criminal effort had taken their patriarch's life. In 1999, the family won a wrongful death civil trial against a bar owner who allegedly assisted Ray. The jury concluded that the assassination was the result of a conspiracy, although the verdict had no bearing on Ray's conviction.
While no definitive legal proof of a conspiracy has ever been accepted by the U.S. government, the deep distrust many Americans harbor for the circumstances of King's death remains a critical part of his story. The narrative of the lone gunman is difficult for many to accept when considering the sheer number of powerful institutions that wished King silenced, especially given his radical pivot toward economic justice and anti-militarism. King's ultimate legacy is not his assassination, but the enduring power of his principles. He remains the most studied figure of nonviolent political change in the 20th century. His life revealed an astonishing truth about America. The nation's greatest strength lies in its capacity for moral change, a change that can be forced by the sheer unwavering moral authority of the oppressed. His dream that the nation would live up to the true meaning of its creed was interrupted on that tragic balcony. Yet the seeds of that dream, planted through the boycotts, the sit-ins, the freedom rides, and the marches, continue to bear fruit. The path to equality is long, but the blueprint for the journey, the philosophical roadmap of nonviolence and unconditional love, was left behind by the man who refused to hate his oppressors, even unto death. The mountaintop speech was right. King did not get to the promised land with his people, but he charted the course, and the shadow of his sacrifice still stretches across the American landscape, demanding justice, equity, and the final fulfillment of his arrested dream.